Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live on porn. My name's Hannah, and with me we've got Josh, who's a student from Manchester, and Bethany McDonald, who you run workshops on porn as part of sex education. And this is all to accompany the new doc that we've got going out on Radio 1's iPlayer channel today. It's called Brought Up on Porn, so it's looking at the effects of easy access to online porn on young people. So you're going to be helping me explain that. Josh, you're in the documentary. Let's just first of all talk about the scale of porn and kind of how easy to access it is. When did you start watching porn?
I think the first time I watched pornography I was about 11 or 12 years old. I saw it on a friend's phone at school, in the school playground. There was maybe about 5 or 6 of us around watching the same video at the same time. And I think from then, it was so commonplace, it wasn't an unusual thing for us all to be watching it at that age. Everyone had it on their phones and everyone watched it.
So right from the start of you watching porn, it's been available on your phone, which I guess is a change within the past sort of 10 years or so with smartphones coming in.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's so widespread. Like, I could get my phone out now and see millions and millions of videos or pictures. And I think it's gone from the days where you have to be on a laptop at home watching it. Now you can watch it anywhere, anytime, any place.
I'm sure that will be something that resonates with a lot of people watching. If you do want to get in touch, please just leave some comments below and we will be taking some questions during this Facebook Live. So Bethany, you work with a group called the Naked Truth Project. If you could explain what that is.
Yeah, so I am the youth and schools worker for Naked Truth, and our kind of aim is to open eyes and free lives from the damaging impact of porn, and that looks at kind of the impact of porn on our mind, on our relationships, on society, and really we just want to encourage young people and everybody to have healthy, good relationships.
And like Josh was saying that since the age of 11, 12, he's been able to access porn on his phone or online. What are you hearing from the young people that you work with in schools and youth groups?
Yeah, young people, we're going into secondary school, so at kind of year 7, age of 11, majority of them have already seen pornography. They've all got it on their phones. There's kind of no awkwardness around talking about it. They're all very used to talking about it. And if they haven't seen it, then it's likely that by the time they've been in school for a year, 2 years, then they've had mates that have shown it to them, or they've accidentally come across it whilst doing homework, because you don't have to look very far. I actively try and avoid it, and yet I still get videos sent to me from on my email, or it's on my Facebook, or whatever it might be. So it's very, very accessible.
Tell me a little bit about your story, because not only do you run workshops, but you have a real personal perspective on this.
Yeah, I first saw porn at the age of 9, and I think for guys it's maybe seen as like a funny thing. You're a lad, if you watch porn it's very easy to talk about it, but for girls you don't really talk about porn, you don't really talk about sexuality and kind of what's healthy for women, and we kind of don't really want to talk about that too much. So I first saw it when I was 9, and then basically was very confused about it. I didn't really understand what I was seeing, and then throughout my teenage years watched more and more of it, then started to look for it and thought, oh, this is what sex is like, this is what you can just have sex with anyone you want, you don't have to have a relationship with them, you don't even have to like them really, you can just have sex. And that for me was too terrifying, and so I totally avoided relationships. And through really when I was a student even, kind of stopped watching porn when I was about 21, and that was really hard. By that point I was watching it 2-3 times a day.
And how did that affect you? Watching it 2 to 3 times a day, is that a lot?
Yeah, I think it is a lot. Even people who kind of say, yeah, I watch porn maybe 2-3 times a week, that's a lot. So I would have considered myself, whether you want to use the word addicted or you have a compulsive habit, it doesn't really matter what word we use, but I felt like I couldn't stop. So I wanted to stop several times. I tried to stop, but I actually couldn't. So the thought would come into my head of, oh, right, you should watch porn, or I feel like I want to watch it. And I would try and get rid of that, because I thought, no, I don't want to, I need to do something else, or I don't really want this to be part of my life anymore. But I couldn't stop watching it, and so I basically couldn't sleep or rest or whatever until I'd watched it. And I think that's the story of a lot of young people that we're speaking to, and adults as well.
And welcome, you're watching a Facebook Live from BBC Newsbeat, and this is to go alongside documentary that we've got on iPlayer now called Brought Up on Porn, and that's looking at the effects that you feel porn is having on you. And Bethany was just talking now about her porn addiction, but Josh, you've got quite a different perspective on porn, haven't you?
Yes, I do. Well, I watch pornography maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I don't feel like it's had any impact on me whatsoever, positively or negatively. I'm not necessarily for porn and think, oh, it's a great thing, but it's certainly not a negative thing. I think it personally just depends on how you, as an individual, let it affect you. Like, I don't let it affect me. I don't let it warp my perceptions of women. And if everyone was like that, then pornography wouldn't be a problem.
But there are definitely viewpoints from people in the documentary who have had problems with it, and we've been hearing from other people who say that it is difficult to stop watching it maybe when you watch it. What is it about it that becomes so, if not addictive, so sort of compulsive to watch?
I think it's very hard to sit, like, I totally appreciate what you're saying, but it's very hard to, when you are kind of watching porn as part of your sexual expression and your sexuality, to then, when you turn to real life, totally detach yourself from that, if not near impossible. So when you go and look at porn, you are searching for something that you want. You look for what you like, you look at what turns you on. Then it's very hard to not do that when you're with someone in person. So say you've got turned on by some certain act that you've watched online, you want that person to behave in that way because you've been turned on, which is okay and fine. But the danger is that it can actually end up, I mean, science is now showing that it has the same impact on your brain as kind of drug addiction and alcohol addiction, where people end up starting out watching something maybe a bit softcore occasionally, but then they end up requiring a bit more to get that same kind of high. So they end up watching things that maybe once upon a time they would have never wanted to watch, maybe things harmful or kind of nasty towards women especially. Porn doesn't exactly celebrate female sexuality.
Okay, and that's definitely a topic that we'll come on to in just a second. We're hearing from you guys, so thank you, please keep sending in your questions. Richard has said, if it's true that porn is in some way damaging, why wasn't that realised earlier? A few years ago, people were saying it's good and a part of growing up. I swear the research on this changes every year. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I think one of the examples that we always use is the kind of research behind cigarettes. So if you go back 50, 60 years and you look at advertisements, doctors and physicians are actually saying, hey, if you've got a cough, smoke cigarettes. That's great. It'll be good for you. And there are kind of adverts of pregnant women smoking saying it actually gives you a skinny baby, a low birth weight. Isn't that amazing? Now we know, we look at those adverts and we think that is ridiculous. We now know that smoking is directly linked to lung cancer and tons of other health issues. And the same is happening now. And the reality is it's quite hard to do research on porn addiction, because who wants to say, hey, do a study on me and my porn use? It's quite hard. But as kind of people are becoming more open about it and willing to talk about it, now science and research is actually catching up.
That's the thing, it is taboo in our culture, isn't it?
Certainly. Yeah, it's not really the sort of thing you can talk about seriously. I mean, we might sort of laugh and joke with my friends about watching porn, but we wouldn't have a serious conversation, a serious sit down and debate about it. It just seems in society it's one of those things we can't talk about.
Mm-hmm. Amongst your friends, and obviously now you've taken part in the documentary, and so I know that you started having a few more chats, it's opened the discussion a little bit more among your friends. Have any of them said to you that porn has in any way sort of changed their approach to sex, or the things that they think about, what's expected of you in the bedroom?
No, not really. It's just sort of, I can't speak for everyone, but the ones I certainly did speak for, they felt it doesn't really have an impact. It's just fantasy. It's not reality, and as long as it stays that way, then there's no problem.
Mm-hmm. And Bethany, you go into schools and workshops and you deliver workshops where you talk about porn and try and open that conversation. What kinds of things do you hear from the people that you speak to?
Yeah, so we do workshops with young people, with parents, with teachers, youth workers, loads of different people. But when we're speaking to young people, I think they actually are starting to be concerned, especially when they've started watching it when they're very, very young, and have kind of watched it all the way through their adulthood. They're worried, especially boys, worried about, actually, would my girlfriend want me to watch porn? A lot of the girls in the classroom are saying, actually, if someone watches porn, they'd consider that as cheating, because am I not good enough? Why do you need something else to kind of get yourself turned on? Surely I'm enough. And so there is a real concern for young people, and obviously we go in and we don't want to just say to them porn is potentially harmful. Actually, we want to encourage them to have healthy relationships, so we're trying to get them to think about, what do you want from a relationship, what do you want from sex, and does porn match up to that? And a lot of them, by the end of the lesson, we never force them to say anything, but by the end of the lesson they're going, actually, yeah, I'm not sure I do really want porn to be a part of my future relationships.
But just to pick up on what Josh is saying, is that thing of maybe separating fantasy from reality. Isn't there a way for porn to be a healthy thing in a relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a scientist, so for those of you that are, don't kind of take me too seriously, but I know that there are a lot of chemicals released. Kind of dopamine is the one that gives you a high. Oxytocin, there's also chemicals that are released when you have an orgasm, which kind of connect you and bond you to the person that you're with. And I know that those same chemicals get released when you watch porn, and so it's all fine and well saying it's kind of a fantasy, it's just something I do on my computer on my own. But the reality is, actually, chemically in your brain, and this is what scientists are looking at, that actually it's very hard to detach fantasy from reality, because it's not just like watching a Disney film and then leaving. You actually have an emotional, physical, obviously, response to watching porn. So something's actually going on in your brain.
So we're hearing from you guys. Please keep sending in your questions. One here from Greg. He says, everything in moderation. Anything pleasurable to human beings creates a subset of people who become addicted or compulsive. It's important to configure our public health to address all issues regarding dopamine regulation. So I guess he's saying that there are ways to build it into your life in moderation.
There certainly are. I mean, as he says, everything in moderation is fine, as long as you're not watching too much of it. You know, if you watch it, for hours and hours a day, then that is a problem. But if it's 2 or 3 times a week, you can't really say that's going to have an overwhelming negatively impact on my life or anyone's life who's watching it in that moderation.
One of the aspects that comes up in the documentary that we've got on iPlayer now, Brought Up on Porn, is the new normal, how it's changed people's perception of what's expected of them, and that might be in terms of what they do sexually or how they look. So to take that thing about body image, have you ever watched porn and compared yourself to the people you see on there?
No, and I don't really think that it could have that much of a negative impact on men or women either, because there's pornography out there featuring all kinds of women, all sizes, all shapes, hair, no hair, everything like that. And I think, it doesn't necessarily promote this idea of a new normal at all.
Okay, that's really interesting. So you feel like you're able to watch it and just completely not compare yourself to guys in there?
I don't think you should let yourself be influenced by it, and if you are, then the problem's with the individual rather than what you're being influenced by.
Okay, and Bethany, what's your perspective on that? Because I can see.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly mature and amazing. Like, if you're right, like if somebody is able to kind of have enough self-confidence, if you're comfortable enough in yourself to then be able to watch something and say, I don't care what they look like. And you're right, there's all these types of genres and different people that you can watch, but the kind of mainstream pornography that's out there does tend to be a couple of steps on from what we see in media and advertising. So you have women with huge boobs, little waist, big bum, skinny, often shaven, as we talked about, and kind of this very stereotypical view of women. And I think it's harmful. I know when we go into school, girls are saying, I can't match up to that, and I'm worried that boys are not going to want to have sex with me or want to be with me because I don't match up. And so I think there are people who kind of feel like you do, but it's even kind of, especially for young people now who are kind of 13, 14, who've been watching it since they were 7 or 8, things are only going to there's only going to be, as time goes on, more porn available. And so, you can obviously remember a time when you didn't watch it and you're now 21, but those people who are actually 13, 14, who are just constantly exposed to porn, there's more of a kind of crisis at hand there, I think.
But the girls who are saying to you about being able to match up to what's in porn, is that a pressure that they're feeling from watching porn themselves, or is that something that they're being told by boyfriends?
I think both. So kind of girls do watch porn. I think that's a big taboo as well. People don't talk about girls' sexuality, as I said before. So girls are watching porn, boys are watching porn, they're seeing it in school, they're seeing it by accident, they're seeing it on billboards everywhere, kind of advertisements even. And I think kind of watching it in relationships, I know a lot of girls who are saying, actually, my boyfriend wants to show me porn because then we can get turned on together and do that. And so it's a really big mix. I think generally it is more boys that are watching it. I think now a lot of teenage couples and things who, one of the big issues that, is sexting, so actually creating porn themselves, which if you're under 16 is actually illegal. It's child porn. So if you're sending naked photos of yourself, that's a huge issue that is massive in schools. We go into schools and the majority of the class would say, yeah, they've sent naked pictures themselves to someone they don't even know.
And for the boys that you hear from as well, do they compare themselves? Do you hear that boys compare themselves in terms of their body image to what they see on screen?
Yeah, I think when we're in a class setting and we're all together and we're all they're kind of laughing about it and going, well, I don't need to compare myself because I'm massive anyway. That's the reality of lad culture, I guess, and group culture. But then when you, after the class, and most people go off for break, and there's a couple of them that stay behind at the end, lingering for quite a long time, then they're actually saying, actually, yeah, I really hope that's not what a girl's expecting me to look like. So yeah, I think it's common among men and women.
But is that not something at all that... Would you ever have conversations among your friends about those kind of expectations of what a girl would expect of you?
No, certainly not. It's definitely not the sort of thing we'd discuss. And I think if we did have a problem, then it wouldn't be... You wouldn't go to your group of friends and say it. But I think, we know that pornography isn't real. It's not reality. And that not everyone can certainly have a penis the size of some people in the videos. And I think a lot of people realise that. I certainly realise that. I think a lot of women realise that, and I think a lot of the men realise that too.
Yeah.
So
and I suppose the thing is as well, you can watch a normal film or see advertisements
and not get influenced by it. So why, when it's sexual, are we saying people are definitely influenced by it?
Mm-hmm. You're watching a Facebook Live on porn, so this is to go alongside a Newsbeat documentary that's come out today. It's called Brought Up on Porn, and with me is Josh. He's 21, he's a student from Manchester, and he is part of the documentary. And we also have Bethany, who is from the Naked Truth Project, and she runs workshops talking about porn as part of sex education. And so relationships, let's get onto this aspect of relationships and how porn can figure in relationships. In any of the relationships you've had or people you've been with, like how has porn figured in that?
It hasn't, to tell you the truth. I've never been asked by a girlfriend or a partner if I watch pornography. I think if they asked me, I'd be honest. Whether they'd like that answer or not, obviously, remains to be seen. Mm-hmm. But it's never really featured. But I can see how it could feature, and I can see how it could feature in a positive way.
Mm. Certainly, some of the people that we've spoken to as part of the documentary have said we watch it together, and it's part of our relationship. It's given us ideas. I know. Let us know if that's something that is happening for you as well. And how about with the people that you work with? I think you briefly mentioned about even teenagers watching it together. Like, what in what sense?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a lack of sex education. It doesn't get talked about in school. I know you talk about that in the documentary, that we just don't talk about sex enough. And so young people who are now having sex much earlier than they were however long ago, are now like, well, how do I do what am I supposed to do? And so they're going to the only place that they know where to learn, and that's porn. And so, they're not getting good sex education from their parents or from school or from any other source, and so porn seems the only obvious place to turn. I know for a lot of LGBT teens as well, that sex is definitely not spoken about, and so for them, porn is a really good place for them to learn. And so my opinion and kind of what we talk about in Naked Truth is that it's kind of like if you go to porn for sex education, not being aware that it's made for entertainment, as you've talked about very maturely, I think a lot of us go to it potentially naively and say, well, I'm going to learn about sex from this, but actually that would be like learning to drive, from watching a Fast and Furious or from playing GTA or something. Actually, it's not real, and so we need to be really careful when we're kind of talking about sex education from porn.
You did make a really interesting point there about LGBT people, and we've had a message from David who says, I suspect a greater acceptance of LGBT people is because of porn, because all types of porn are mixed in many of the general sites. People are watching all types of things, often out of curiosity. It's no longer hidden away, it's out in the open, and that helps to destigmatize it. So surely it can be a good thing in terms of sex education. What do you think?
I don't see how it can be interpreted as a bad thing. We saw in the documentary there was, that homosexual man who he learned basically, because obviously nothing was taught in schools, that's how he sort of learned, and that's how he learned to accept himself, that, this is normal and that this is real. So in that sense, I say it's certainly a positive thing.
Mm-hmm. Please let us know how porn is kind of featuring in your lives. It's definitely something that I heard while working on the documentary time and time again. It's people saying, I have not had good enough sex education. How am I possibly meant to know? Not just the mechanics of it, but kind of the feelings behind it. And is that what you're hearing? I mean, you go into schools and youth groups and deliver these workshops on porn. How do teachers actually respond to that? Are most teachers open to you doing that?
Most teachers want someone else to cover it, because I can remember having sex education from a really awkward geography teacher, and it was so embarrassing and so painful, and he just covered, I know, always the geography teacher, always kind of just covered the very basics and mechanics. And I think even Ofsted said in 2014, they said sex education in the UK is shocking. All we're doing is covering the mechanics of reproduction, and we have to do more. We have to be talking about emotions that go with it, relationships, all these different things, and that is definitely true, and teachers are now aware of that because of the issues of sexting that are coming up, or young people who are kind of coming into danger because of their porn use or sex and relationships. The fact that now more young people are having sex, getting into maybe negative relationships as well. Teachers are saying, yeah, please, and they want external people to come in and talk about it, because I think there's a bit from young people, they're more willing to talk about it with me than the teacher that they're going to see for the next however many years as they're growing up.
And how about parents? Because I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like probably not many young people have a relationship with their parents where they could talk about porn. So when you say that you're going to go and deliver a workshop to open that discussion, how do parents react to that? Yeah,
so we do a parent workshop. We're doing it up and down the UK, and it is amazing how many parents actually turn up, because they're really concerned, and people are concerned for people under 18 and their porn use and kind of relationships and how that might kind of impact them in the future. And so parents are surprisingly willing to talk about it. They know it's an issue, especially now kind of parents who are in their 20s, 30s, who are maybe starting to have children now, because they grew up in a generation where it was really accessible. So, if I was to have children now, I'm 24, or I've got friends who are starting to have children, they're saying we really want to be talking about this with our kids when they are even kind of 7, 8, 9. And so it's great that we're now in a generation that wants to talk about these things more openly. But generally parents are up for it. Some of them are thinking, no, my child would never watch porn, but actually it's really, really important to open up the conversation that, you don't want to be having necessarily in-depth conversation with your parents about porn, but actually for a parent to say, if you ever have an issue, then you can come and speak to me. Yeah, and kind of open up that dialogue, because there was some new research, I think last month, from the NSPCC, and they found that 75% of 15-year-olds have watched porn. So it's kind of a thing that you can't ignore. Parents cannot ignore it. And Jack has been in touch and said there needs to be a whole review of sex education in the UK. That's why so many young people end up researching it through porn. Was that something in your experience as well?
Yes and no. I think the sex education I got at school was just laughable. I mean, it was basically like, this goes in here, and that was it really. There wasn't as Becky was saying about emotions, there's so much more involved. There's so much more that we needed to learn about, that we need to discuss, that we didn't get taught, that we didn't talk about, and there were a lot of unanswered questions. And I'm not saying that porn was my answer or porn is the answer, but it certainly answers some of the questions that were left that weren't answered in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. And is that something that you think should come from schools? Like, did you have conversations with your parents about it as well?
No, certainly not. I think as schools have a legal obligation to teach our young people about sex, and they're not doing a good enough job. That's why so many people are turning to porn.
Arthur has been in touch saying some porn can be educational, honest, some can be funny, whatever floats your boat. He says some can be degrading. As long as nobody gets hurt or harmed by it, there are a lot worse things out there. What do you think to that?
I think it's really hard to, because when you're on a porn site and there are videos that maybe it's amateur stuff and it's kind of, you don't really know who's on the video. So we're kind of now talking about human justice issues. You don't know who's on it. You don't know if they want to be there. Now, of course, not every, there's some organisations that say everyone in porn's been trafficked, and that is not true at all. Some people love their job. Some people want to do it, great. But there's definitely, when we're watching something, we don't know if those people want to be on it. We don't know if they consented to it. Did they consent to just being on a video? Do they want to do the acts in that video? We don't know who they are. We often don't even know if they're kind of over the consensual age to be in porn. So it's really hard. And when you're on a porn site, then there is, as kind of Arthur said, there's kind of stuff that maybe doesn't seem degrading, but a click away from that is stuff that's degrading. And so it's very hard to try and avoid that stuff, I think.
Josh, is that something that you think about if you were watching porn? The kind of the background of it, how it's made?
No, not really. I don't think. I mean, obviously, well, in the experience that I had when I was researching, I was looking into it, is the actual amount of women in pornography who feel empowered by it, who feel sexually liberated by appearing in it. It really turns them on, that people are turned on by them. And they really saw it as a good thing. Obviously, that's not the case across the board. There are going to be people who don't feel that way. But for the most part, from what I found, it was just women feeling empowered and feeling better about themselves.
And Josh, we've just had a message in from Jeremy saying, good on you for sharing your experience. Not many men would. Sorry, that was from Isabel. Clint has sent in, he wanted to share his experience. My story is that it was always easier to give myself to digitized women and play out fantasy scenarios with them in my head. This enhanced my self-contentedness and taught me that pleasure was only about me. Being in a real relationship always required so much work, to think about the other person, to make sacrifices, and to have difficult conversations. Porn erodes true intimacy with people. You're nodding.
Yeah, because that was my experience. I mean, I didn't want a relationship with anybody. I'm now married, and for the first, been married a couple of years, and the first year or so was really hard to kind of trust somebody and to kind of know, do you actually love me for the way I am? Do you just want me to look a certain way? And my husband as well, he had an issue with porn. We don't want porn at all now. We both don't want to, and that has I think it does erode intimacy. And that story is really, really common. We get phone calls all the time to our office of people saying, I now don't understand what it's like to be in a relationship because porn makes it all about what I want to see, what I want to feel. And so that's really damaging for a relationship. If you go into a relationship thinking that and the other person thinks that as well, there's going to be no sacrifice, no love, and that's really essential for a relationship.
Josh, what do you make of that?
I think that's, again, based on how you let it affect you. If you don't let it affect you, then it's not going to be a problem. So Becky was saying she used to obviously be a porn addict. She said that her husband had issues as well, but they've worked them out now. And I think that's because it no longer affects them. If you allow yourself to be influenced by media of any form that strongly, then, I've been romantic to say, but that's more your fault than the fault of the media.
Mm-hmm. And one of the themes that comes up in the documentary, which is on iPlayer now, brought up on porn, you can go and watch that, is this idea of consent and what ideas you bring into sex. So is that something that you have to kind of negotiate? Because if porn has maybe normalised new ideas about what to do in the bedroom? How do you kind of negotiate that if you see something on porn and you think, I want to try that out?
I think sure you got to ask first. You know, you can't. But if you agree sort of boundaries and set limitations, then it can enhance sex you're having with someone else. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, as long as you're comfortable and you're happy with what you're doing, and the other person's comfortable and happy, then it can't be a bad thing.
So there's a way to figure it in, but it's about having that conversation, starting that conversation. And I should say, if you're kind of been affected by any of the issues we're talking about, or if you feel like you might be having a problem with porn, or you just want to find out more, you can go to the BBC advice pages. It's all on there for you to have a look at. So let's talk more about the kind of problems and how to get help. So what kinds of things do you hear about from the people that you work with, that you run workshops with?
So for young people, some of them are kind of saying, actually, I can't stop watching it. I've kind of similar story to me, tried to stop watching it multiple times and couldn't. So for, there's kind of issues if you're under 18, but there are programs available to kind of do recovery, if you like. So there's kind of a thing called Fortify, which is available. You can find that online. Very, very easy, and it's an online. You can get the app on your phone, and you go through some teaching, and kind of it gives you things to do, advice, kind of where you should, if you get the urge, how do you kind of change your mindset, how do you move that thought away, really practical things. And so that's called Fortify, which is really good. We then have a lot of kind of teenagers, young people, and even people in their 20s, 30s saying that they now are in a place where their partner has found out that they watch porn and they're not happy about it, but they want to watch porn, but they love this person. What do they do? And actually we're finding that we set up recently a group for wives and partners of men who use pornography, who are basically experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder because they've found out after years and years of not knowing that their husbands have been using porn, and sometimes have then actually been engaging in things like chat rooms or like live webcam sex, which is really just a step up from porn. And so that's really broken their hearts, and they're experiencing really kind of detrimental impact to their emotional and mental health. And that's what that news article said today. That lady, Angela, I can't remember what her last name is, but she said that porn use is impacting men's sexual and emotional health.
But I suppose there's a debate there about what too much porn is, and when you know that you've got a problem. Because I guess, Josh, you'd say that you watch porn a few times a week, would you? And some people would consider that a lot, some people wouldn't consider that a lot at all. How do you know if you feel like it's getting out of control?
I would say that I guess everybody kind of has their own personal opinion. It's really important, like, if you were to get into a relationship, that you are open and honest. You don't want to, whatever, 2-3 years in a relationship and your girlfriend doesn't know that you've been watching pornography, and then she actually doesn't like that and that upsets her. It's better to have open, honest conversations. And I guess it's personal. I would say that I don't think it's great to watch any porn. I think even, it's kind of very common. We all now talk about the impact of the media, the sexualisation of children, sexualisation of men and women, the media. We all know that the media can have a negative impact on the way that we view other people and sex and relationships. And so, not saying that we should boycott all media, of course, but actually I guess it's individual choice. I don't think we can say one video is too much or 10 videos are too much, but it is about every single person being aware of the potential damage that it can have on them.
So is it about how it affects your everyday life then, I guess, if you find yourself not being able to go to work or not being able to meet up with friends, things like that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we kind of say to young people, because some of them are like, well, how do I know if I'm addicted? How do I know? And we say to them, well, just try going a month without it and see if you can do it. And, that's for them, is that actually they come back and they say, actually, I can't do that. I really needed it. And that really panicked me. Or some of them are like, yeah, I could do it. I'm fine. I don't actually need it. And then some of them are saying, actually, I never really want to watch it again. My life was better without it. So, it's different for everyone. But I guess I would say if you're worried about your porn use, maybe just try whatever that's for you, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. Try and go without it and see what impact that has on your life.
We've heard from Ross. Thank you. We've got loads of comments coming in, but Ross says, is the real problem that our modern day basis for love is based solely on sex, as if that's all that matters in life? So I guess that picks up on what you were saying earlier, Josh, about it's not just porn that can impact on the way people see themselves and see the opposite sex, or see the people that they want to have sex with or relationships with.
Yeah, no, I do sort of agree with what he's saying, but I think a lot of people, particularly a lot of young people, I disagree that it's all about sex in life these days. There's still, there's good, honest relationships out there. People are still talking. People are falling in love. It's not. I disagree with what he's saying about this whole. We are a more sexualised society, but we are not at like a critical level of being a sexualised society.
Is it something, do you think, that people worry about then, just because it's right there on your phone?
Yeah, I think people do worry, and it is accessible, and if anything, it might even be too accessible. But I don't believe that it's harming people, and I don't believe it's harming our society in the way we love each other and the way we have sex with each other.
Okay, and what do you think to that?
Yeah, I would lovingly disagree with you. Just from the stories, my own story, from the stories of the kind of hundreds of people that we speak to, people that are phoning in, that there is a real public health crisis. I mean, the government are trying to kind of crack down on kind of bringing in filters for children, and people are now very aware of the impact that it can have. Whether we could sit here and debate whether it, does everyone get addicted? No, I don't think they do. I think maybe someone can watch it 2-3 times a week and maybe feel that it doesn't impact them at all. But I think it's probably naive to say that actually, because we know everything that we do impacts us. Everything that I watch, whether it's a film or everything I read, impacts me. So if I read a book on anything, whether it's a novel or a factual thing, that then changes the way that I perceive the world and people around me. And so porn works in the same way that everything else does that we kind of let into our mind.
But you can read a book and be impacted by it, or watch a film and be impacted by it for 5 minutes about it. Isn't it almost patronising to say that porn has this devastating long-term?
Positively, majority of the time we are impacted positively by these things. But I think what that comment was saying, actually, sex has become a kind of commodity. We just sell it. We want to put ourselves out there, and we think the main way that we do that is kind of physically and sexually.
Just one final comment.
On that, no, but we don't play violent video games, and that turns us violent, does it? So why would pornography turn us into these sort of sexual deviants with warped minds? I just don't agree with it.
Thank you both so much. You've been watching our broadcast to accompany the Newsbeat documentary Brought Up on Porn. I've been joined by Josh, who features in the documentary, and Bethany. And please do head to the BBC advice pages if you've been affected by anything that you've watched here. We've got a special which is going to go out on Radio 1, 1 Extra and Radio 4 at 5:30 until 6 today. So please keep your questions and texts coming in, and you can watch that documentary Brought Up on Porn on iPlayer now. Thank you.